Well, we're joined now live by the Georgian President, Mikheil Saakashvili. Sir, thank you very much for talking to Al Jazeera. Do you trust Russia to observe the ceasefire plan that you signed up to today? Thank you. We appreciate your comments, but
before I say, I have to say that I agreed to talk to Al Jazeera because I was also very impressed by bravery of your journalists here and by in-depth coverage of what you've been doing, what has been happening, the tremendous tragedy in Georgia. I indeed signed the ceasefire which I was willing to sign from the outset. It is a ceasefire. It's not a long type of political arrangement yet. That will take much more time. But what it says that most of this Russian equipment and forces should leave the whole of Georgian territory. There should be prompt discussion of international format and deployment of the peacekeeping force in South Ossetia. And of course, we also envisage the same for Abkhazia. Because without genuine peacekeeping forces, those areas will stay depopulated, they will stay devastated, they will stay the sources of misery. And meanwhile, at the same time, we had the good discussion today with Secretary Rice, and it was constructive, and we focused on rebuilding Georgia. I mean, you spoke now that Georgia's infrastructure
could I just interrupt you there? The key question, really, if I can interrupt you, is whether or not you trust Russia to observe the ceasefire deal that you signed up to today and withdraw immediately from Georgian territory.
Well, it's a big question. I mean, since I spoke to Nicolas Sarkozy, and he already told me that there was a deal, and then 1 hour after that, the forces of the Russian forces took over several other towns and urban destinations in Georgia. And but when Sarkozy came here first time, at that moment, President Medvedev said they are stopping hostilities, and that's when they really started to bomb with cluster bombs, and there people started to commit crimes, running around, rampaging, looting, and killing people. And not only troops, but what is the most worrisome, that lots of mercenaries came in, lots of irregulars, lots of drunk criminals basically going around together with Russian troops and doing all these atrocities the world has been reported to. I'm afraid it's just the tip of the iceberg. I think there is much more to come.
All right, we'll get to that in a moment. But Sergei Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, has said that Russia will negotiate, will talk to Georgia, but they will not deal with you. Is it therefore time for you to resign?
Well, that's exactly what Russians wanted, and it's not about me. They want to end Georgia's independence. They cannot live with Georgia's independence. This invasion was never in first place about South Ossetia. They cannot care less about South Ossetia. South Ossetia is a small place, was a small place with a population of less than 25,000 people. What they wanted to, they've never made the big secret of the fact that the fact of existence of Georgia's independence and fiercely freedom-loving policy didn't fit their expectations and their taste. We all knew that. It's not about President Saakashvili. It's about Georgia being free and independent. Presidents come and go. We went through 2 sets of elections, and my term is limited. I'm in my last term, and we have parliamentary democracy, which Parliament was in session despite this war. Our media is free, and this is a modern democracy. They don't like to have modern democracy apparently in their border, and they don't like any modern democracy. But they somehow decide to start from Georgia. I've been warning the world since many months that we are expecting a Russian invasion. Nobody heeded the warning. Everybody thought that I was exaggerating a little. Now I think that I even diminished the threat because even my expectations were grossly defied by what they are doing.
But surely the point is that much of the population of South Ossetia would much prefer to be independent or part of Russia than part of Georgia.
Excuse me, which population? They've just thrown out 100% of the population, including ethnic Georgians. And we're talking about a very small place where ethnic cleansing took place. Like this, you can go to any area in the world, cleanse it of its residents, and then say, oh, they don't want to be part, whoever stays there, they don't want to be part of the mainland. This is exactly how Russians. Do you think now inhabitants of Karelia want to be part of Finland? Finland owned Karelia. Then Stalin's Russia invaded it, took out Karelia, and then announced to the world that Karelia is no longer Finland. They cleansed Kaliningrad, which was Königsberg, and now Kaliningrad no longer wants to be in Germany. That's the logic of ethnic cleansing. You throw out all the inhabitants, bring in the others, and then they say this place don't want to be part of the bigger one. What was happening in South Ossetia, they turned the town of Tskhinvali into some kind of military camp. They blocked the roads from all sides, and all our attempts to lure these people with, to induce them to talk with soft power, constructing hospitals, roads, even amusement parks and concert halls, etc., met fierce resistance from the Russians.
Okay, but you've accused the Russians of very big crimes. You've said that they set up internment camps, that they were getting reports of large-scale human violation of human rights. Do you actually have any evidence of what you've said?
The reports we've been getting, and these are not my words, Human Rights Watch went there and talked about large-scale looting, policy of ethnic cleansing, harassing people and killings, and deliberately targeting the civilians. What we've been getting about camps, that was from different sources on the ground. We have more than 1,400 claims now at this stage, and it's growing very rapidly, of gross violations of human rights. We are going to codify it. You can imagine, I mean, they brought in with them lots of irregulars, people who, people who not only are very atrocious, but have no responsibility. I mean, they are just some legal elements, criminal elements, militias. I never thought Russia had that much number of these kind of rogue elements in its territory. And all these people come in now and go and rampage through villages. And the Human Rights Watch documented that. Human Rights Watch clearly said that there was numerous violations of humanitarian law. The population is grossly unprotected, thrown out, targeted specifically based on their ethnic origin. And now, after all this, you are telling me, well, whoever stays don't want to be part of Georgia. Excuse me, but that's not the way to handle contentious issues. I mean, it looks like classical Balkan type or, 20th century, worst cases of 20th century type of ethnic cleansing and ethnic purification.
All right, you spent Friday meeting with Condoleezza Rice. Are you disappointed at how long it has taken for the United States to become actively involved here, and also the level of support that they've provided you with?
I think President Bush made some incredibly strong statements. I think there has been the prompt delivery by Pentagon of some humanitarian corridors and assistance. Overall, I think that this whole tragedy could have been avoided if we had acted, all of us, before. But
the United States certainly hasn't sent in military support, which clearly would have assisted you greatly, because your own forces were quite obviously not enough to defend your territory.
Well, our army was never designed in the first place to counter the whole entire Russian land force. We are talking about
So then why did you go to war with Russia?
Much more.
If that's the case, why on earth did you go to war with Russia?
You are not talking to some suicidal, crazy man. Russia invaded our territory. Georgia clearly exercised right to self-defense. We had two choices, either to surrender outright or to try to fight back. Well, our troops fought back very bravely, destroyed almost the whole infrastructure of the main Russian invading army. This is the 58th Army. Russians got lots of reinforcements because all their land force was mobilized. Mr. Makarov, head of Russian General Staff, is sitting in Tskhinvali and directing operations from Vladikavkaz and from Tskhinvali, deep inside our territory. Then we decided to move troops back to the capital together with their equipment, because basically that's the main thing to defend right now, because Russians didn't make any secret out of the fact that they want to overthrow the government and basically by that end the statehood of Georgia and independence. And the point here is that we knew that they were preparing for some adventure. I didn't know exactly the dates, but once we saw them, we saw them.
Let me pick you up there, Mr. President. If you knew they were preparing for a military conflict, you knew that their army was stronger than yours, surely either it was irresponsible of you to take your country into war, or you were expecting the support of another power.
Look, none of this. Neither did I take my country to war, nor we expected anybody to help us. The only thing is when Russian-backed separatists started to barrage all the villages around them, started to kill people, and then simultaneously Russian tanks started to go through the border, after unilateral ceasefire, after multiple calls to stop, to compromise, to talk, to negotiate, to find some equitable solutions, there was no other option for us but to resist and to try to push them back. What else any other responsible democracy in the world would have done, for God's sake? I mean, we are a small democracy, but we are still democracy. We still have right. Still have obligation to protect our population. We still have this constitutional right to do that. Certainly, this is something that, and the dilemma we were facing is incredibly. It's brutally simple, but at the same time, very. I don't wish anybody to find themselves in such a situation. But you also should realize that this is the first time ever since Russian intervention of Afghanistan that Russia had done something as brutal as this. And it looks like old times are coming back. They've done this in Afghanistan. They've done it in Czechoslovakia in 1968. They've done it in Hungary in 1956. They did it towards Finland in 1939. Now Georgia is the next. I didn't want to add to the Prague in 68. Budapest in 56, Tbilisi in 2008, or Kabul in 79 indeed. But that's exactly what has happened. They almost came to the capital yesterday after President Bush made a very strong statement. Apparently they had some moment of hesitation or turned back or something. They are still close to the capital. They are in several other urban areas. And of course, this all reveals this plan of invasion was much bigger than just fighting for some small piece of territory. It was a very major design. And Georgia was occupied in 1921 once by Bolshevik Russia, exactly in the same circumstances. They didn't have warplanes at that time, but they had all the rest. If I could just
interrupt you there.
And we were living for
only a few hours ago,
go ahead.
Okay. You launched what sounded like an attack on the West during that press conference with Condoleezza Rice. It sounded like you were blaming the West for not responding or acting quickly enough.
No, not the West.
Do you think that NATO and the West is partially responsible here?
I think that some levels of irresponsible Western, some political circles, and I'm far from blaming all of them, because I also see now Chancellor Merkel going to Moscow and trying her best, or President Sarkozy. But the reality is that people underestimated the threat. People thought we were exaggerating the extent of it. People thought that it's better to, in some way calm down the Russians and, not to irritate them too much. But, the Russians perceived it as clearly as an appeasement, and clearly perceived it as a major sign of weakness. And the instinct Russian leadership had is that it's the right time to push even more, to be even more aggressive, to be even nastier, so that they could achieve their strategic goals. That's what has happened. And I think it's high time to move from tactical vision of things, or from opportunistic visions of things from some people, to more strategic one, and see what's at stake and what real existential issues are faced right now by every country, not only the Western countries, by wider Middle East, by post-Soviet space. Everybody that is in search basically could be under a target of attack, because Russians not only attacked us, but they targeted, say, main pipeline carrying Caspian all to Europe with their strategic missiles. This is SS-21, medium-range ballistic missile. The newest technology they have. This is the upgraded version of the missile Soviet Union withdrew, when they under Gorbachev from Europe under the deal with Reagan. Now they're back with their missiles, and not only that, Soviet Union never shoot those missiles at anybody. Russia is shooting them, and Russia is shooting them at pipelines. Russia is shooting them at residential quarters. Russia is shooting them at innocent and unprotected countries. And this is worse than what the Soviet Union could ever contemplate.
President Saakashvili, do you have any credibility left? You've just admitted that you drew your own country into a war that you knew you couldn't win. You didn't win it, and in the days since you've claimed that you did.
I'm afraid I don't really get your question. I mean, I have what is really happening to my country is that, you know, it's under brutal invasion, and you don't ask the victim of the invasion whether they have credibility left or not. The only credibility we have is belief and credibility in my own country, in our own future, in the fact that we will throw them out, in the fact that they will not sustain this, in the fact that they will not get away with this, and that the fact that we will rebuild our country no matter more and make it even more successful than it was before. Georgia was a very successful country until now, and it will become much more successful after these invaders go out of my country, leave us alone, and allow us to rebuild our lives.
President Saakashvili, we appreciate your time. Thank you very much for talking to Al Jazeera. That was the Georgian President, Mikheil Saakashvili, talking to us there live from the presidential office. Well, let's get some reaction now. Jonah Hull is here with us. What did you make of his comments?
I think what we're seeing here is President Saakashvili and the Georgian government in general engaged, as they have been for several days now, but really stepping it up, engaged in a massive offensive to try and persuade everybody of Georgian non-complicity in this conflict altogether, of Russian ultimate aggression, and even today spreading the net wider and pointing the finger at the West, at NATO, at the US for turning their heads the other way, as President Saakashvili repeatedly warned of a Russian buildup of aggression and its intent to eventually attack. This, I think, is now the offensive, and it is aimed as much at the West as it is at a domestic audience here. For the Georgian people, whom he may well know now, might think of turning against him at some point when the dust settles and they realize they've lost South Ossetia and they've lost Abkhazia. He's putting in now every effort at his disposal to convince them, as much as anyone else, that he was right, that he did the right thing, that he made the right decision at the right time, and that he had no choice in the actions he took because he took them in defense of his country and in the defense of his people.
Why does credibility not seem to matter that much to him, given that he's willing to go on television, say that he knew he could never win, didn't expect any support from anywhere else, but thought he'd walk in there anyway?
No, the point that he's making, the picture that he's painting, is one of a man, a president, devoted to his country, to his people, which no doubt he is, and a situation in which he was pushed to the edge and had to go in and defend innocent civilians, innocent Georgians in South Ossetia, who were coming under attack, it is true, from South Ossetian separatists in the week preceding this conflict. This is a man, a president, putting himself on show to his own public here through these mechanisms and the international media, and painting himself as a man, an upstanding man, doing the right thing for them.
He said just a few moments ago that he wasn't disappointed with the timing and the level of support from the United States, but he must surely have wanted a bit more support and a little bit sooner.
One imagines that he would have been hoping for that, yes. I mean, there is one scenario, one obvious scenario that explains somehow the strategic thinking in all of this, and that would have been that President Saakashvili went for a quick hit operation into South Ossetia, thinking that in 2 days and 2 nights of a huge barrage against such a tiny place, his troops would quickly move in there, and that with the support of the West and principally the United States, the Russians would be halted in their response. That was a miscalculation, if indeed that is what he's thinking. The other side of it is that he may have felt isolated and alienated from his old ally, his friend and ally, the US, after the NATO meeting in April in Bucharest, where Georgia was denied a membership action plan, which it dearly wanted and very much expected to get. And with that denial, he may have felt that he was being cast out into the cold, and therefore that he simply had to do something about this problem himself.
Jonah Hull, thanks very much for that.